Hey everybody, super fun fact here. Adderall was initially developed in 1930. It was handed out to our soldiers in World War II to keep them going when things got rough. So, fun fact, I'm Cliff. This is Life with MS. You're not gonna wanna miss this video because it has been a rough 2 weeks and I'm gonna share with you what happened. Let's get started. All right, well, thank you for joining me today. I'm gonna talk about Adderall and I'm also gonna talk about Modafinil. Now, both of these are off-label uppers basically to help with fatigue for MS. And I've had a very interesting experience with both of them. And I wanted to share because I'm not gonna lie, the last 2 weeks have been brutal. I switched to one of them and I was not expecting what happened. And I thought I better talk about it because if you're in a situation like I am and other people with MS and you're trying to figure out how to deal with this MS fatigue and actually get through the day, there are some little helpers like Adderall along the way and go by different names under generic labels. And Modafinil, same thing, which is also known as Provigil. Now, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a healthcare professional, I'm only sharing my experiences here, so don't get any crazy ideas. Talk with your doctor first if you consider either one of these things I'm talking about. So what happened? After about 3 years of taking Adderall on and off to deal with my fatigue and my MS, I talked to my doctor about switching it up a little bit. Now, what I've learned with the amphetamine stimulants for myself is that basically, after a while, my body adapts to them and they no longer function. So what I was doing is I would take them during summer when the heat was absolutely killing me, and then I would totally go off of them during the winter when I didn't need them because the cool weather would basically leave me with a decent amount of energy. And that's fantastic because I sleep well when I don't have this stuff in my system, and I feel decent when I don't have this stuff in my system. But for those summer months and those late spring months and those early fall months, I need a little help to actually function because anything above like 75 degrees just drains my energy super fast. So I had been taking Adderall for like 3 years on and off, and it worked well. What I discovered over the last summer is I would go to bed at night after taking Adderall early in the morning to get through the day, and my feet, even if it was hot in the room, would be freezing. And I'm talking, it could be 95 degrees outside and 75 degrees inside. And I just could not sleep because the rest of my body was hot, but my feet were freezing. And I talked to my neurologist about it and I said, what is going on with this? Is this related to the Adderall? And I had narrowed it down to what I thought was the Adderall. This is just my assumption that the Adderall was causing the capillaries in my feet to constrict. That's how it brings the blood pressure up and keeps you awake, along with the manipulation of dopamine and serotonin in my head and all that stuff. And I had noticed on the days I had taken the Adderall, my feet would be really cold at night to the point where I couldn't even sleep. I mean, it felt like they were in an ice box. And most of the time I can't feel my feet. So the fact that I could feel my feet be that cold made it really bad. So my doctor says it may not be related to the Adderall, but let's try Modafinil, which is not nearly as strong as Adderall and is supposed to last throughout the day. And that was like a month and a half, 2 months ago or something. I said, great. Now, and here's what I found with Modafinil. It's not approved for MS. It's kind of off-label for that, so it's not covered by my insurance. And I was gonna have to pay out of pocket. I got prices from pharmacies ranging from $130 for a month to $800 for a month of this stuff. And I used GoodRx, and this is not a plug for them, it's just what I used. And it brought it down to like $25. Now, I discovered I could not use GoodRx on a controlled substance at Sam's Club. If I remember correctly, I ended up finally getting it through CVS because of the controlled substance issue with GoodRx and Sam's Club. I used to take half a pill of Adderall, which is, I think, 5 milligrams early in the morning. Otherwise, I couldn't sleep at night. And even at that, I still had to get a ton of exercise in the day to basically make sure I was rested enough at night. For the Modafinil, they asked that I take 200 milligrams for the whole day. And I thought, no freaking way. Even if it's a weaker drug, I wasn't gonna do it. So I started off with 50 milligrams at first, and then I didn't feel so well. So let's go through a list of the cons I experienced with Modafinil as I ramped up and tried to get used to the drug and have my system acclimate to it, which, spoiler alert, it never did. I've created a list here in visual format because I think this will help people retain some of the information. I'll also put this stuff in the description below so you can copy and paste it if you want to. All right, known as Modafinil by the generic name and Provigil by the brand name. Let's discuss the cons first. Flu-like symptoms, number one. Well, I gotta tell you, this was just gnarly. At first, I actually thought I had the flu. When I started taking the drug, I thought, wow, what bad timing. But then I realized as I increased the dosage of the drug to try to get my body to acclimate to it, the symptoms actually got worse. In the morning, I would take the drug, and then by about 11 a.m., the flu-like symptoms would come on. And then by 2 o'clock, I would be in bed feeling like just absolute crap. And it felt like a multiple sclerosis flare. By about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, everything would resolve. So that was very strange. The nausea for me was one of the worst parts. It was just a very sick feeling. And I tried to eat different things to help with it. Usually I can pop some ginger, and ginger has been my go-to for nausea for years and always worked really well. It only had a mild effect on this level of nausea. And I was just so nauseous all the time. I felt like I was on the verge of vomiting. And that can be extremely fatiguing. The dry mouth was another thing. No matter how much I drank, it felt like my mouth was a desert. It was just constantly so dry, it was almost painful. And then the extreme fatigue. After the very short and very mild boost of energy from modafinil, the extreme fatigue would set in, and it was like worse than the MS fatigue in that with the MS fatigue, I can still function somewhat, but with the extreme fatigue from the modafinil, it was like almost just impossible to function at all or even move. I found myself just gasping for breath all the time. It was almost like the drug was toxic for me, and that leads to the next couple of things. Smelly urine. Yeah, super stinky, dark urine. Like this stuff was really hard on my system or something. And as soon as I stopped the drug, about 11 hours after, everything resolved. And the smelly dark urine started right after I started the drug. And I thought that was pretty normal until I was like 3 or 4 days in. And I thought, this can't be healthy. The bad breath probably had something to do with the dry mouth. I'm talking not like, ooh, kind of gross. I'm talking like stank breath, like clear the room kind of breath. My gut was clearly not happy with what was happening. And then this shaky and yucky feeling, like my whole body was vibrating, kind of like it does with MS. But unlike MS, it affected my head too. Like I felt super dizzy, but not in an MS way. It was just like the room was spinning like I had a sinus infection, but laying down or turning the lights off wouldn't help. It just wouldn't go away. And that was fatiguing as well. And of course, the insomnia. Now, that can be expected with any of these things I've learned. However, even on a small dose, I took a quarter of the pill the first 3 or 4 days, and I could not sleep at night at all. And you know how that works with our MS. If you don't get a good night's sleep, you're just asking for trouble. So I'm sure that was compounding the issues on the following days. And last, but certainly not least, this was not covered by insurance. So like I said, I had to use a couple of those discount apps and find the right pharmacy that would accept those discount apps and make that work. And that was kind of a headache as well. Now let's talk about the pros. Well, I gotta say, I just had to give it some points for showing up. And that was a very brief and very mild energy boost. It seemed like a more steady energy boost than Adderall. Adderall's very aggressive for me. It would fade really fast, and then it would go right into the symptoms, and I would just start feeling like crap. So not that many pros for this guy, but lots of cons. Let's move on. Now, let's talk about the pros and cons of Adderall. Well, I've been on Adderall for a number of years now, going on and off it like I explained. And also, it's important to note that I tried the extended release version, which did not work for me at all. I couldn't sleep at all, and that turned me into a monster, so I avoid that one. I find the normal Adderall to be effective enough for me when it's managed right. But let's get into the cons first to make this a fair fight. And so the crash can be hard. Now, when I take an Adderall in the morning, it usually lasts a good portion of the morning, and I only take half of the recommended dose because I don't need a full dose. I don't want to be up at night. I'm totally all right with the crash happening around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon because then I can lay down for a half hour, recover a little bit, and then if I get enough exercise, I can run the stuff out of my system and I sleep decent. I don't sleep great. I sleep decent, and that's good enough in most situations. The short burst of energy is extreme. Even on a very low dose, for me, it hits me like a rocket, and I am very productive for a few hours. I get a lot done, probably as much as I would without it in 8 hours. And I suppose that's why people abuse this drug. It is extremely effective in what it does. But that being said, it can be very fatiguing on the way down on the other side of it. So that's why I put it on the cons list. It's not a steady energy release. It's like I said, rocket fuel for me. Now, my prescriber requires that I come in every 3 months when I get a refill. And while I totally understand why they do that and I support that, I'd put it on the cons list because it is slightly inconvenient. The urgency to urinate with this stuff is a problem for me personally because I already have bladder control issues. But when I take this stuff, water just goes right through me, and then it becomes very difficult to manage my bladder when I have that much energy. So I have to keep that in mind when I'm on it. And I have to be honest here, sitting in traffic after taking this stuff can be very nerve-wracking because when I have to pee when I'm on it, I have to pee and it ain't going to wait. Insomnia, of course, this is an upper. It's always going to have some level of insomnia with it. As long as I get enough exercise, it's not a huge deal, but I have to plan on getting at least 15,000 walking steps, which sounds crazy, and it is, but that's what we're dealing with. And another one here, not covered by insurance. We already talked about that. However, when used with a discount app, it is quite affordable. A few years back, availability was an issue. I have never had any problem getting it, but I know people that have. And last but not least, we talked about this a little bit, the ramp up and down to maintain effectiveness. My body acclimates to this stuff pretty quickly, requiring more and more to do the same job. So instead of taking more and more, I just basically ramp down until I'm taking none for a couple of weeks, and then I'll ramp back up and it will become effective again. So from that perspective, it's manageable, but I have to plan for those few weeks to be a little less productive than they normally would. But it's nice because I get more sleep during that time. And I will say during the ramp down, the side effects can be uncomfortable, but they're not horrible. So let's talk about the pros of Adderall. Okay. For me, it reliably kicks in 30 minutes. So I can take this stuff and I know in 30 minutes, I'm good to go. And that's on a very small dose. It's dependable that way, which is number 2 here. And it works most of the time. I'd say 95% of the time. If I'm in a huge MS flare and my fatigue is super bad, there is nothing I can take that's going to help. I have literally taken an Adderall and then gone right to bed and slept for an hour or 2 hours during a really bad flare. There's just nothing that will beat that fatigue. And on those days, I don't even try. I don't put anything else on my system. I just don't take it. And I just accept the fact that I'm going to be laying in bed or on the couch until IMS decides to participate in daily activities. And that's that. And last on the list here is a low dose is highly effective, which is nice. I don't like taking lots of doses of stuff. The other stimulant I talked about for my MS was, I don't know, it was like 200 milligrams recommended daily dose. I don't like that. I can just imagine that going through my body, and it seemed like it was not doing well for my body, even at a low dose. This one is a super low dose, and it doesn't really affect me negatively. Now, what are the long-term effects of these stimulants? God only knows. I think we have a lot of evidence so far behind that, and that concerns me. But, I do what I can. This MS would take over my life if I don't find other ways to manage it. So I consider this a positive to have these tools. There we go. Our pros and our cons for multiple sclerosis regarding Modafinil and Adderall. If I had to choose, I think the clear winner is going to be Adderall for me. Modafinil was a horrible experience. I felt so sick on this stuff. And I know other people have had completely different experiences. So please take that into account if you're considering this stuff. But there are things like this out there. If you're dealing with really bad fatigue, maybe it's something worth looking into. So are stimulants good for my MS fatigue? Yeah, they help. But the right ones help. The wrong ones really brought me down into the depths of hell. Like, they were just not good for multiple sclerosis in my situation. Of course, I know a lot of people that are on Provigil, Modafinil, and it works for them fine. So my experience is my experience. Yours might be totally different. I hope this has been helpful and brought some useful information for those of you out there. My name is Cliff, this is Life with MS, and I'll talk to you soon.